Have you ever felt something strange about the place you live in? As a child, our storyteller and her family moved into a house where she witnessed a few things. People who weren't there. Or were they? My name is Edwin. And here's Alexa's true, scary story.
I moved from a three-family house to a one-family house in a town called Medford in Massachusetts. It's about 10 minutes north of Boston. And it was built, I would honestly say probably 1900, if not even a little bit earlier than that. And it was a really large house. There were 3 bedrooms and a full bathroom upstairs, a study, a large living room and dining room. But when we moved in, it needed a lot of work. The upstairs we couldn't live in, and so that was the first thing my father started to redo. So there was always like plaster over the stairs, but you always had to walk past the stairs in order to get to my bedroom, my father's bedroom, the bathroom. So it was always like a creepy spot for us. But I was probably about 4 at the time, so we're talking very early 90s, probably 92, and I didn't know anything about spirits or the paranormal at the time. I just was a little kid playing, running around. I'm the youngest of 4, so I didn't have many kids to play with because they were all older, off doing their own thing. And I remember I was walking to our bedroom, and this was in the afternoon. I'd probably say 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I looked up the stairs and the tarp happened to be down, so I could see the stairs clearly. And I glanced up because it was just really bright, and there was a man at the top of the stairs. He was older, I'd say probably in his 70s, just very nice. He had like cargo khaki pants on, a nice sweater, and he had a smile. I wasn't scared. I just glanced up, more inquisitive. Who is this man at the top of my stairs I've never seen before? And I know we didn't have workers in the house at the time, so it was just very odd. But I stood there just like, oh. And he wasn't transparent, but after a couple of seconds, I realized he wasn't a firm person. He wasn't solid, but he wasn't like wispy or like a shadow or anything. And I just kept looking at him, and he's smiling, and he's like waving, and he's slowly walking down the stairs towards me. And I'm like, and I can't remember if he said anything, but I know I heard his voice. I think it was more like a, hi, it's okay, kind of a thing, but I can't remember exactly what he said. And then I would honestly say it was probably 2 minutes of this. And I realized, like, this is not normal. Like, I shouldn't be seeing this. And so I did get freaked out, and I ran to my mom. And my mom is definitely not someone who would believe in, like, seeing spirit or ghosts or the paranormal. Grew up in a pretty rough and tumble town at the time, outside of Boston, and had no problem telling you were nuts for thinking certain things or you saw something. But I was 4 and I was scared. So I ran and I told her there was this guy, and I described the sweater and his age, and he was nice, but there shouldn't be anyone up there. And she's, no, there's no one up there. It's okay. And she calmed me down. And then eventually I just went off to play or watch something on the TV. And she went outside, and we had a neighbor next door who lived there since he was young, and he was in his 50s at the time. So he knew this house really well, knew the previous owners. And my mom's like, hey, his name was Al. She's like, hey, Al, can I ask you a question? Alexa just saw someone, and I want to know, does he sound familiar? And he was like, okay. So she describes the man that I described, and he got a very serious face and was shocked. And she's like, "What? Why do you look like that?" And he goes, "What she described is the man who lived here, and I believe he was the man who built the house. And he died several years ago, and then it's his kids who sold the house to you guys. And he's been gone for a while, but what you described is exactly what he looked like." She got nervous and was like, "Okay." And that was more like the last we ever really talked about it. I always remembered it, and it freaked me out going by the stairs. But Al never said anything to me, and my mom never brought it up, except when I got older and I mentioned some other things I saw. She started to mention, "Oh, remember that guy?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, I definitely remember the guy. Sometimes I thought it was a dream," but she's, "No, you really saw him." So that was the start of that house having things. The basement was always the scariest part, and that's common in most, definitely old houses. But all of us, every one of my siblings, and including my mother, who didn't admit it till many years later when we moved out, that the basement always felt the most intimidating out of the entire house. It wasn't well lit, and the floors, they weren't dirt, but they were like broken up concrete. You had to make sure you didn't twist your ankle walking around, and we definitely filled that basement with junk. But we would go down, and there was like a place you could work out, and as kids we would go down and get toys or games, whatever we left down there. And there was a back corner that it had barn doors, but where we live, I don't even know if there ever was like truly farms or barns. It's definitely city. And it just seemed so out of place. And there were like shelves there too, which we had our stuff on. And I don't know if anything was ever left. My father got rid of it before us kids ever saw if there was anything left down there from the previous family. But everyone other than my dad, avoided that back corner because you felt as if something was there. And unlike the feeling I got with the man, where it was like, I wasn't scared, you knew it wasn't supposed to be there, but I didn't feel threatened. Down there, it almost felt like something was gonna, this sounds so creepy, but snatch you and bring you like into the darkness. And so we always just stayed away from that corner. That was where we put things that like we knew we would never need. So no one had to really ever go over there. To this day, I've never, like when we moved, I didn't clean out anything in that corner. I had my family do it. And the older my siblings got, the more they ignored it, or I don't know if they continued to feel it, but the older I got, the more scared I got of it, and the more I would avoid going in that room to avoid having to see the corner. I didn't even want to see it because I was so afraid that there was going to be something really like menacing staring at me. We did many times have toys that you would have to squeeze to make talk, or baby dolls and things that the older you get, you just toss in a box and leave downstairs. We all would be like sitting in the living room watching TV, and all of a sudden you would hear the dinosaur make the little dinosaur roar when you squeeze it, and we all looked at each other and we tried to chalk it up to maybe a toy is pushing on it or whatever. And eventually we got the nerve, probably when I was like 10, to go down and look at it, and it was at like the top of a box, nothing was touching it. So finally my oldest sister, who's 4 years older than me, was like, forget it, and took it and threw it in the trash and was like, we are not keeping this because I can't keep hearing that in the middle of the night or during the day or when I'm alone, hearing this dinosaur roar in the basement that I know shouldn't be making a noise. So it was things like that would happen in the house. It was a lot of noise, but I then had an experience outside in the backyard, which was really strange. And this is a story I don't tell many people just because it leads up to questions I don't always have the answer to, or like they really think I dreamed it and it didn't happen. But we always used our back door. and it was on the opposite side of the street. So you had to walk all the way up our driveway. It was one day after school, running up. I took the bus, so I always walked in by myself, and normally I beat everyone home except my mom, and sometimes she was off getting my siblings. So I was, I'd say 12, and I ran up the stairs, and I glanced, and all of a sudden I look, and my yard was pretty big. It had 2 huge maple trees, and then there was like a rock that created almost 2 levels in the back, and we definitely didn't have nice grass. My dad never did more than mow it, but it was fine. We could play in it, and there was, in between the large trees and the rock, made this like unofficial path to get from the lower part to the upper part. And we didn't go in the back part very often, just because there was a lot of poison ivy and oak, and we didn't want to get any of that. So in my glancing, I see this, it was a Civil War soldier, and I would bet my life on that. And it was in a Union uniform, and it was navy blue, and he definitely had his rifle on his shoulder, and he was just walking from the backyard, the upper part of the backyard, down that path. And he was just looking straight ahead, and he definitely was more transparent. Like I could see the yard on the other side of him, but I knew I could see him, and I had no doubt. And I just stood there, and it was a good like 15 to 30 seconds of me just staring, and him just walking, and no acknowledgement of me. Like the man spoke to me, this guy, he was just looking straight ahead and just walked. And then all of a sudden I like blinked and ran, and before I opened the door, I looked through the windows of my back porch, and there was nothing there. The grass didn't look like it was stepped on or anything, and I just ran in the door. Now that I've learned it, as I got older and got really into the paranormal, I would almost call it like a residual haunting or a residual experience, where I don't think he even knew a house was there or that he was being visible in current times. But that was the only time I saw something of that error in that time by the house. And I'm not far from things that would be more of like the Revolutionary War, but I swear it was Civil War that he was wearing, and I don't think anything happened up in that neck of the woods and in the Civil War, but he was there. It was probably a few years before I ever mentioned seeing any of that there, and I know that if I ever felt a weird feeling or whatever, I know I could say it to my mom or my sisters specifically, but I could always tell by the looks on their faces, especially the older I got. I think they thought I would stop saying stuff. So they were just kind of like, yeah, okay. So I was like, no, I'll keep it to myself. And then I think it was my neighbor a couple of years later. I was like, do you know what I saw in my backyard? And he's like, what? And I told him, and he's like, no way. And he definitely believed me. And he's always heard all of my stories, and we're still friends now. But he was like, have you seen it again? Has it been there? Is it in my yard? And I'm like, no, it's not in your yard. And I've only seen it once. But it took me a while to be able to talk about that one. My dad finally finished the upstairs, and my siblings were up there, and I finally got my own room. And I was 14 at the time. We moved out probably a year later, but my room didn't have a door yet, but it was all redone. Purple walls, and my bed was in the corner. And diagonal in the other corner by the window was it had this like cutout for a TV, but it had this like small closet built in and a couple of drawers underneath, and it was white. And I had a pretty small TV at the time. And I've always been a little creeped out about TVs that were off and you can see your reflection, just because I'm always like, oh God, something's going to be like standing behind me and I'm not going to know it's there. And I always thought it was funny of me to think that. Nothing ever happened that triggered me to feel that way. But at the time I was doing homework, so I didn't really care. And being 14, I grew not out of it, but it was like, okay, come on, dude, you're fine. You don't have to worry about it. And I'm sitting on my bed, and it was a day bed. So there's bars on all sides except for one. And in the back corner, so over my right shoulder, was the corner of the room. And I'm right next to the doorway. Like, I can see the doorway. If anyone was to walk in or walk past my room, I would see it. And I was the only one home except for my mom, who was in the kitchen cooking dinner. I glanced up because I was thinking about some, I don't know, math problem or question or whatever for my homework. And I look in the TV just because it's almost straight in front of me at the way I was angled on the bed. And I swore I saw a girl sitting over my right shoulder. And I was like, oh, and I blinked and looked down and looked back. And sure enough, there was a girl behind me over my right shoulder in the corner of the bed where no one could sit unless they climbed over me. And I definitely did a deep breath, and I pulled myself back and sat up a little straighter. But I knew I didn't want to stop looking, because if I stopped, she may go away. And it's not that I wanted to talk to her. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't actually like dreaming or seeing reflections or something that wasn't there. So I did glance over my shoulder to make sure that there was nothing there, and I didn't have stuffed animals or anything on the bed. And I turned back, and I expected not to see anything, but there she was, still sitting on the bed. And she was in this white, I'm assuming it was a nightgown, but I could only see down to like right below her chest. And her hair was really dark, and I really couldn't see her face. The best description I can give is, if you've ever seen the movie The Ring, the girl that like crawls out of the TV. I know that sounds silly, but that's somewhat of what she looked like. That dark hair that hung really low and covered her face. That was what was there. And I can't remember if The Ring was out at the time. I don't think it even was, so I didn't even know what that was. But I kept looking at her, and I was like, all right, calm down. Like, this isn't the first time you've seen something, so take a deep breath. And I looked, and the longer I looked, the more I was like, she looks creepy. Not like the man or even the Civil War soldier. Like, this doesn't feel good. So I looked over my shoulder again, and I didn't see her there. And I looked back at the TV, and she was still there. And this is 2 or 3 minutes. This is a long period of time. And she's just sitting there, not moving. Again, I can't see her face. I didn't hear voice or anything. Just sitting there. And I'm like, I don't like this feeling. I don't like the vibe I'm getting from it. So I just like slowly, and I don't know why I went slowly, like it was going to disturb her or something, but I decided to just like close my book and get up. And the minute I put my foot to stand up on the floor, I looked back up to make sure I didn't fall. I looked back up in the TV, and she was gone. And I just kind of got up and walked to my mom, and I didn't say anything. I was just, hey, is dinner ready? And I just totally did not want to even think about it. And I definitely didn't sleep well. I kept looking. Actually, I kept the TV on at that point. I didn't even want to see if she was there or not because I was so scared. So I just ignored it. And that's something I definitely told my friends at school, but I didn't tell my family. I think at this point I'm in my 30s now, but it took me until we moved out and like I was in my 20s to really be like, hey, this is what I saw. And it was more of, we were laughing and talking about growing up, and I mentioned it. And they were like, why didn't you ever say that? And I was like, what was I going to say? You guys didn't always believe me anyway, so you probably were going to think that I saw a reflection of something could be explained. And they just, well, that house was really creepy, so I'm not surprised that you saw that. But that was the last thing that happened before we moved out less than a year later. But that was the scariest and the most, other than that dark corner, that was the most like menacing feeling. She matched that feeling of she would be the thing that was in that dark corner downstairs.
Alexa eventually moved to a new place, but not everything stopped. Watch out for the continuation of her story in another episode. Thank you, Alexa, and the upcoming storytellers. If you want to share your story, just reach out to our email at hello@truescarystory.com or find us on the website. We just set up a call and you tell your story. We then make it a little creepy and share it here. Tap follow to keep getting new stories. See you soon.